Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Stanton. I'm the founder of the Stanton Group Wealth Partners. We're a financial planning and investment management firm located in Naperville, Illinois. Today we have as guest on our webinar Donna Holmes. She's a senior vice president of investor relations with Iroquois Valley Farmland Real Estate Investment Trust. Donna is responsible for communicating the company's vision and investment strategy with investors. And she is very passionate about creating an opportunity for all people to reap the health benefits of nutritional food grown in a sustainable and socially just society. She has extensive experience in the alternative asset space. And we also have with us from Iroquois Valley Farmland, Claire Masesson. She's the vice president of farmer relations, and her work centers on the process, program development, and resource building for farmers. And she's very focused on Iroquois Valley's farmer-facing work to ensure that partnerships with the operating farms are successful. And today we'd like to cover with all of you an overview of Iroquois Valley Farmland Reit, the importance of regenerative agriculture and the health impact, environmental impact, and farm examples of organic and regenerative agriculture, and a little bit on the investment structure of the Real Estate Investment Trust. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end to go over any questions that might come up. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Donna Holmes. Donna.
Thank you, John. And thank you again for the inviting Claire and I to speak today. We're excited to share information about our company and looking forward to your questions. So maybe we could just jump right in. You want to go to slide 2, John?
Okay.
As you can see,
trying to change. Here we go.
There we go. As you can see, who is Iroquois Valley? Iroquois Valley Farmland Reit is a real estate company, which just is a company that invests in real estate, and in our case, independent farms. Farmland is an asset class that investors and institutions have been investing in for decades, over a century. And a couple of the nice things about investing in farmland is it's not correlated to the equity markets, and it provides protection against inflation. So institutions have recognized these benefits and have been investing, as I said, for over a century. Iroquois generates both a financial return and also a social impact. The work we do provides nutritious food and helps with cleaning the water and improvement to the soil and the environment. And as John mentioned, we're structured as a real estate investment trust, otherwise known as a REIT. And REITs are a corporate structure. They're modeled after mutual funds because they take a pool of capital and make investments with it. So many investors are making investments into the same properties. The structure is scalable. There's no limit on the number of investors we can have, and it allows us to support this large investor base. Additionally, it doesn't have a term like a fund would. It's a entity that goes on in perpetuity until it's terminated. So that's who we are, how we in our structure, and I'm going to turn it over to Claire, who will spend a few minutes talking about why organic farming is important and how we work to help farmers that we work with. Claire?
Yeah, thank you. If we can go to the next one. We have the organic standard for a lot of reasons. Many of them are, a value statement. Otherwise, they're also a regulatory third-party standard for us. So the organic certification is the only one in the US and really the world that's held to a legal standard and it's federally enforceable. There are a ton of alternative certifications that farmers may want for their markets and we'll get to those later, but for their own marketing, for their own value statements. You've probably heard about regenerative agriculture and whether that's organic and regenerative, whether that's a different definition, it remains to be seen. It's all subject to interpretation. The organic standard has been long fought and is certainly not perfect, but it's the best that we have that we feel, and it allows us a third-party mechanism to really share the value of what our portfolio is creating. So when we invest in a property, we know that it is independently certified by a third party that are held to specific standards. It means that our small staff does not have to go out and fully understand exactly what's happening, or that we don't have to create our own standard. It's really beneficial for us in articulating what is happening and what specifically is not happening on our farms. So, pesticides are a big one. There's no synthetic pesticides and fertilizers allowed within the organic standard. But there's also a lot of other elements, such as biodiversity and having crop rotations and all sorts of other things. And we actually have some materials on our website. If you go to our impact pages, where you can see, we did a white paper a few years ago talking about what positive attributes are in the organic standard that really affect the people that we're working with. Importantly, it also has a price premium for commodity crops. So if you look at the price difference between corn and soy on the conventional market versus the organic, there is going to be a difference. With the events happening in the world right now, those markets are really in an interesting and precarious place because of what's happening with the war in Ukraine. We're seeing a lot of disruption, but generally these standards tend to elevate and allow for farmers to kind of get a little bit out of the scale game. They don't have to be quite as big in order to compete on an organic price point. They can have a little bit less land and do more with it. So that also helps make it more viable for a lot of young farmers who are not able to accumulate farmland as quickly as maybe some of their other more resourced competitors. So that's in a nutshell why we support organic and why we'd like to see it remain a strong standard. But for us, it is a baseline, and you'll get to see some of what our farmers also have chosen to represent themselves beyond organic. We can move on to the next one. So I just said a lot about why organic is good. Amazingly, only 1% of US farmland is certified organic. So there is a huge amount of potential for farmland to be managed differently. That does not necessarily mean that all farmland that's not certified organic means it's, being farmed conventionally. It means that, there's barriers with certification. Those are real as well. But for the most part, it's a wide open field. We think that there's a value statement in supporting organic, and we would really like to see it expand, for markets, for farmer viability, for what it means for ecosystems. We require that farmers that work with us either certify organic or begin the transition process to certify organic. So when people invest in our portfolio, they know exactly what they're getting, and we are part of hopefully moving this needle, beyond 1%. You can continue. So something that's really challenging for a lot of farmers, particularly young farmers, who are kind of disproportionately represented in our portfolio in a good way. We're by and large supporting young farmers. There's a lot of barriers when it comes to access to land, access to financing, how they can cash flow during an organic transition, because as I mentioned before, there's a price premium once you are certified organic, but during the 3 years when you're farming organically but not certified, you are still subject to conventional market pricing. Um, there are certainly places in the U.S. where lenders are more familiar with organic operations and they're not considered super risky, but there are also places, and we have certainly seen this in the upper Midwest, where the majority of our portfolio is located, where lenders simply did not, are not accustomed to serving organic farmers. Their cash flows are different for them. They don't have the same types of crop insurances that are available to de-risk, that de-risk and subsidize conventional farmers. It's, something that they're not super eager to touch. I think that we're starting to see that change, but Iroquois Valley really emerged as a financial services provider and real estate investor that was able to really occupy this niche where farmers would reach out to us looking for access to land. They might be very young farmers who have no equity, don't have a down payment saved up. They might fit really well into our lease portfolio. And that's something where we purchase the land and then farmers lease it from us. They're able to indefinitely renew their leases when they're in good standing. They also have the option to purchase land from us at the 7-year mark. And so that's also not a requirement. They can continue renting. They can potentially even buy a meaningful piece of it and continue renting the rest. But we really wanted to focus on longevity and making it possible for the impacts that come from organic farming and a farmer really investing in land stewardship to be in perpetuity. And so we've also partnered with land trusts to put conservation easements on properties when they were applicable and made sense and were desirable for the farmers and sellers. We have, been able to facilitate land ownership. If a farmer, say, leases with us, they might be spending that whole time saving up for a down payment, and they might be eligible for a beginning farmer loan from the Farm Service Agency, which is a government subsidized program for young farmers. They may be able to convert that lease into ownership with them. And if not with them, then also with us. We have a mortgage product, and we're happy to deploy it to enable farmland ownership for those who want it. It's also allowed us to do refinancing for farmers who are looking to maintain their land under different circumstances. We've seen lenders get a little nervous about, continuing relationships with organic farmers, particularly after bad years. And we have been able to approach that conversation with risk a lot differently. And so we really feel like we're accessing in a small little niche where we can really support the farmers who are approaching us when it comes to getting on land and staying on land in whatever form that makes most sense. So leases, mortgages, and then more recently we started offering operating lines of credit to support some of the financial working capital needs that have emerged for farmers. So we can move on to the next one. I think I'm passing it back to Donna here, but basically, my department is the department that gets all the calls from farmers. So they go through a whole investment making process, and everything that we do is the result of a specific need. So someone's reaching out to us because a property is available next to them for the first time, ever in their lifetime. Or because they have the opportunity to succession plan, maybe with a family member, or if they're not part of a farming family with someone else. And so that's just what I would want to underline here, is that these are not the result of us going out and looking at land listings and saying, hey, that looks really nice, that's really well situated, we should find a farmer for that. It's the result of a specific farmer who has identified a key property that they are very invested in already, and us moving forward with them individually.
Thanks, Claire. And I would just add on here that our business model is really just designed to prioritize farmers and also to attract mission-aligned investors. As Claire said, most of our, if almost all of our transactions start with a farmer coming to us with a specific piece of property in mind. And we will go through a traditional underwriting process, looking at quantitative factors, credit scores, their debt, outstanding debt, debt to equity ratios, other accounting ratios. But in addition to that, we also take a pretty holistic approach and look at the farmer's situation. What what are they trying to innovate? What are they trying to do that may be different and maybe a little bit more difficult than traditional um, organic methods? Are they trying a new seed? Are they planting trees on their property? So we really try and look at what the farmer's doing and also who they have available to support them. Are they from a do they live in a community of farmers where there are a lot of other organic farmers where they can learn from? So we like to think that the business is really focused on the farmers, but very much supported by our investors. Our investors are very mission aligned. They totally believe in what we do. And although, no to lose some money after they invest with us, the financial return is not their top priority. They do care about farmers' well-being, the environment, public health. So when we think about growing our business, we really focus on growing our impact and how we can convert more land to organic and regenerative. I think that's all on that slide. John, if you want to go to the next one. And here it just shows how our company works. We were built for scale. Investors who invest with us, we use that money to buy land and either lease it to a farmer or provide a mortgage to them. In either case, we're giving them long-term access to the land. And the farmers will make lease or mortgage payments to us, and that is our only source of revenue. So we don't charge any fees. We use the farmers' payments to pay for our company operations, our salaries, our office expenses, etc. And anything that's left is returned to our shareholders, typically in the form of a dividend. As a Reit, we're required to distribute 90% of our taxable income to our shareholder base. So here we're really trying to share the risk of farming, and it is a very risky business, weather being one of the biggest risks that a farmer faces. But we're trying to share that risk between the farmers and our investor base. And as a result, we're able to provide a financial return, but we're also able to create a public benefit. And we will get to the public benefit a bit more in some of the next slides. I think what may be helpful at this point is to walk through a couple of examples of our investments, a couple farm investments. One of them is a pretty new investment, and the second one is been in the portfolio for a couple years. And since Claire is on the farmers facing side, I'll turn the presentation back to her.
Yeah, thank you. Right here. So Sumac Creek Farm. So we made this. This was one of the first investments of this year in 2022. Rachel and Chris Jones operate a highly diversified operation in Kankakee County, Illinois, which is kind of in the general Chicagoland area. They offer a lot of educational programming and experiential type programming. So there are regular farm dinners available to the public so they can see what this farm is all about. There's also a youth camp program so that kids can learn about gardening and farming and everything that goes into it. We were approached by them with this opportunity. They had been on under 10 acres previously. This is one of the smallest farms in the portfolio, even at 29 acres, but they were coming to us with kind of the smallest footprint that we had seen. And this property was really ideal for them. They survived COVID. This had a few more buildings, and they knew that there was a huge amount of interest in getting people back out to the farm, especially after being cooped up for a while. This provided a really great expansion opportunity for them and a way for them to do more farming. Because previously they were just so on such a small footprint that they, it was a lot of demonstration and a lot of support for their meals. But with this, they'll be able to really meaningfully expand what they're doing. We can go to the next one, which will kind of illustrate the wide range of our portfolio. So something I kind of like to say is that we support farmers at really every level of the food system. You will see the types of people that we support at farmers markets, including a lot of Chicago area ones. We're in 18 or 17 states at the moment. So we have a lot of people doing direct to consumer efforts. They might have their own farm stands, they might have online shops, they might be doing delivery and also the market circuit. We also have farmers that are selling totally wholesale. They're ending up in products. These farmers actually specifically, I don't know if you've seen it in your area, but they are pictured on the back of an Annie's mac and cheese box because they provided the Durham wheat for it. And actually another farm that we work with in Montana, they're both featured on the back of that box. So they, are working directly with brands. There's also people selling wholesale into elevators. Some people who have really cornered the food market and are feeling like there's not a whole lot of organic grain feed and silage opportunities for livestock, and that might support their neighbors. Usually they're highly diversified. They're people who don't have just one singular market. They might have a combination of markets. Because you're in the Chicago area, you might also be familiar with Janie's Mill. That's a grain milling operation, and the Wilkins were our first farmers ever. In 2007, we own land that they farm and leased from us that entire time. And we've seen them develop their value-added business over that time. So the Mill at Janie's Farm is, a more recent addition to what they do, but they're doing flour. We also work with Meadowlark Organics up in Wisconsin, and they also have a grain milling operation, and they do a lot of dry edible beans. So we're working with a lot of people who are working with many different levels of markets. So these folks in Montana have a very large amount of acreage. We provided refinancing for their home farm, which is diversified when it comes to growing pulses. So things like lentils and peas and chickpeas. They also grow grains, a wide variety of wheat. And they graze cattle on a lot of different types of pasture and native rangeland, actually. So behind them in that picture are the Bears Paw Mountains in far northern Montana, and they bring their cows up there every summer. They've also started growing kernza. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but it is a perennial grain developed by the Land Institute in Kansas. This is really exciting for them because it allows them to disrupt the annual tillage cycle on an increasing amount of acreage. So that means they can plant grain and they can have their cows graze it year over year, and they can also harvest it. Kernza is fairly new, and it's just starting to be used more for food. Right now, there's a larger seed market for it, but you might know it if you're familiar with Patagonia Provisions Long Root Ale. It's a beer made out of the kernza grain. There's also an increasing amount of crackers that are and wheat products. It's pretty low gluten, and they've started planting that and have ideas towards planting more of that, so that they can diversify their grazing land and also get some crops out of what was formerly just pastured land. So we can move on from this. So this is really the whole picture, minus Missouri. We've since invested our first investment in Missouri. That is our 17th state. This is kind of our breakdown by product and what we support. We are really starting to make inroads in different places. We entered the Northwest in 2021, and that was a really exciting time for us. That was with diversified livestock folks. And we also entered Arizona last year, and that is for a very exciting project around cattle grazing on native grasslands. So absolutely nothing is planted there. It's all grassland restoration. And there's actually a whole world of desert wetlands that they're supporting and really restoring through this work. So we started in the Midwest. We have a very large concentration of our portfolio there. We're also pretty well represented in the Northeast and growing. So a lot of what people are doing is determined by crop rotation. So that's the majority of our operation. Like I mentioned, that might be people like the Wilkins down at Janie's Mill, who are doing highly diversified rotation of many types of grains. Usually we just refer to that as grains, beans, and some kind of corn product. And so as long as they're doing 3, that's what we call it. We call diversified. We consider that more than 3 operations. So that is referring to people like Prairie Grass Ranch, who you just saw on the last slide. That means they're doing multiple enterprises, so both cattle for beef as well as grain, and so that's a growing part of our portfolio. But yeah, I mean, we like to have our eggs in many baskets, and we think that having a diverse portfolio that's geographically diverse, operationally diverse, and diverse by farmers as well, is really important, and it allows us to mitigate risk. As you might imagine, there was just a lot of flooding that I was reading about in Missouri, in the St. Louis area yesterday, or just this week. When something is happening somewhere, we still have a large amount of the portfolio that's being impacted by different factors. And so we think that that's good for us and good for our investors. So some of these numbers have changed since this presentation. We're actually up to 113 investments, and that is 14 investments this year. And actually yesterday we closed on another farm in Indiana, so we're actually at 15. So we did $12 million in investments just this year at this point in time. And we have 5 more investments kind of in the committed capital zone, representing $3 million. So that's stuff that we expect to close in the next month or so. This has been our busiest year yet. We've had historic interest in our work. And, previously we'd kind of been on a track where we were making about an investment a month. We kind of followed, in recent years, we were ratcheting around like a 12 to 14 investment a year cycle. If we're already there now and we have 5 more, that'll put us over 20. So that'll be a big record-breaking year for us. And we're hoping to, we've really streamlined our process and feel that we can keep on a track like this so long as the capital keeps up. So yeah, feeling good about the portfolio today and what we're able to support. We can go to the next one, which I think is back to Donna.
Yes, I think so. Thank you, Claire. That was helpful. As you can see on this slide, we have about 600 shareholders. And our outstanding stock is valued at approximately 75 million. We're supported by many different investors, and a lot of them have made a relatively small investment. Our minimum investment is $10,290. And I know that sounds like an unusual amount, but that represents 15 shares. The price of our stock is currently $686. Investors are not required to be accredited investors. We did a direct public offering in 2019, which means that we can sell our shares generally to the public. It does not mean that our shares are traded on a public exchange. They are not. It's still a private company when it comes to selling your shares. We require a 5-year lockup, and that is just really to match our investment time horizon. We want to, obviously, if we're investing in these properties, we don't want to have to sell them midstream to pay our investors back. So our investors are committed for the long term. They understand, and as I think I've mentioned, they're very mission aligned. We also issue notes, which we call soil restoration notes. They are basically a loan to the company. They pay 2% interest. We've sold about $20 million of notes. They also have a 5-year term. And I briefly mentioned that investors don't have to be ultra high net worth. We are available to the public. So our investors are now in 44 different states. We're going to try and get the next 6 so we could say we have investors from all states. But really what's important about that is we're building community around our farms. I think our investors really enjoy the fact that they could go to a farmer's market and maybe see cheese or see beef or vegetables from a farm that they in effect own, or at least own a small piece of. Every investor owns a little bit of the 50 plus, 60 plus farms in our portfolio. So that helps diversify the risk to any one farm, and also really supports the community of farmers in the regions in which we invest. And I think I'm ready for the next slide, John. And this, you'll see our financials. Our revenue has steadily increased. Very fortunate and appreciative of that. We try to keep our operating expenses, which is the cost of running the company, to about 3% of our total assets. And just because we realize that this is money that's coming from our investor base and it really is intended to support farmers. We run a pretty lean staff. I think we're 13, 14 full-time employees. And I'm guessing here because we just hired a new CEO and COO. But I think we're 14 full-time. You can see our acreage in the upper right-hand corner and the number of farmland investments in the lower left. The investments, although it's 101 investments, we will often make repeat investments in this with the same farmer. So, for example, if a farmer wants to buy an adjacent property, that's really one relationship, although possibly 2 farm transactions or investment transactions. Our share price is largely driven by the value of the underlying farmland. As you can see from the chart in the lower right, it was stagnant from, say, 2014 to roughly 2019. And even just a slight increase, I think that was about 4% between 2019 and 2020. Between 20 and 21, you'll see a nice jump. We've seen farmland prices increase dramatically across the whole country. We appraise the properties that are in our portfolio either with a personal appraisal at least once every 3 years, or what is called a desktop appraisal, which is an expert looking at the comps and the properties around the farmland and coming up with an appraised value without actually visiting the farmland. But in general, the share price is tied very closely to the underlying farmland values, and those prices tend to go up when crop prices are going up. As Claire had mentioned, the war in Ukraine has caused a shortage of wheat and grains that can no longer be exported from Ukraine. So that has really jacked up the price of food, as you all have probably noticed in the US. And although not a pleasant thing on a day-to-day basis, it has helped support farmers. They're getting better prices for their crops, and the value of the land that they're farming in is increasing. Between 20 and 21, our shares were up 11%. And next slide, please. Our impact. We've talked a lot about our financial aspect. I'm going to turn it back to Claire, who one of her major responsibilities at the company is to write an annual impact public benefit report. So Claire?
Sure, yeah. So Iroquois Valley is incorporated as both a certified B Corporation as well as a public benefit corporation. So a certified B Corporation is administered by a nonprofit called B Lab. That is a third-party verification that does impact measurement. Being a public benefit corporation means that we are legally incorporated to have a public benefit, and we are required annually to report on how we are doing in that. When it comes to being a certified B Corp, we have a recertification every 3 years, and it measures us in a variety of categories, including what it's like for our workers, our customers, our investor community, how we do on governance, and our environmental impacts, which ironically for us, environment in the certified B Corp assessment relates to our office environment. So it's very concerned with whether we're in a LEED certified building or not. It doesn't really capture what we're actually doing through our farmland investing. But we think that both of these have really helped represent our work. We've been a B Corp since 2012, when that was a very small movement. Now there are thousands of B Corps, and it's really become a global movement and certification process. Some very big names that joined in recent years were Danone and Unilever. And, it's a third-party standard that allows us to really try to communicate the work that we do. So, of course, not all of this can be captured. Like I mentioned, environment means different things in the assessment. So we think it's a good step, but we do much more. And so our public benefit report, which is released annually around the time of our annual shareholder meeting, which is typically late summer, that is our way of kind of capturing everything that doesn't get captured in our assessment. So we really report on our statement, which is written there, of we're enabling healthy food production, we're restoring soil and improving water quality through the establishment of secure and sustainable farmland tenure. So that's really getting back to our investment thesis around land stewardship, or land security enabling land stewardship. And so that can mean so many different things depending on where people are in the portfolio. And so one of the tenets of how we start collecting data around kind of the environmental impacts of the farms is we do an annual soil health and conservation survey to understand how practices might be changing over time. So a farmer who's in an organic transition may be doing things differently than a farmer who's been on the land 20 years managing it organically. They might have different opportunities available. Also, where they're situated is going to have impacts. We have a lot of farms that might cross streams, or they might have wetland habitat on the property, and that's, you know, not acres that are cropped or that are grazed, but those are acres nonetheless. And so are they working with the government through the Natural Resources Conservation Service to do any restoration of those? Are they working with other partners? Basically, what's going on the farm and on the property, and how is that changing? So you might have been aware of the monarchs being in the news recently. I think they were just listed as endangered. And I was thinking back to last year, one of our staff members captured a video of eastern monarchs that were kind of fueling up on a riparian tree-lined habitat on one of the farms that we own in Illinois in the Peatone area. It's along a creek, and you know, this is part of their migratory path. It was, you know, that all matters, and that's all stuff that we'd like to be able to communicate not only to our investors and the public, but just to really capture that farmland is so much more than, you know, what gets produced off the land. It's really about supporting ecosystems and understanding how farming can integrate with that and be additive to it. So that's what our impact reporting is really all attempting to do, and we'll see how we do this year when that report comes out in August. You can go to the next one. So this one is getting at that beyond organic question. So our farmers also want to capture their impacts, and a lot of that might have to do with market recognition. It might be a way to differentiate themselves from, you know, other farms that are doing similar work. It might, you know, help capture a different price point. It might just be a certification that provides consumer confidence, such as our raw milk producers in Virginia at Creambrook. They lab test all of their products. They also work with a certifier called RAMI, which is an acronym. And, you know, that's a food safety issue. We also have people who are trying to communicate what they do for pollinators. So there's Bee Better certification. That's by the Xerxes Society. And that is not just about honeybees. That's about all invertebrate pollinators. They plant around 30% of their acres at that farm in Montana, which is specifically not cropped farms. 30% of their operation is actually in conservation and habitat restoration. So, and it's in native pollinator plantings. We also have folks doing the ecological outcomes verification, which is a newer, not quite a certification so much as it's a verification, basically saying, let's not prescribe these things, but let's just find out, let's really measure and understand how what you're doing is impacting the land. That's administered through the Savory Institute, and these folks in Maine on the bottom right are also a Savory hub, which is related to intensive grazing. They raise heritage pigs. We have many people who are animal welfare approved and who are raising animals. All of this, again, is in addition to organic certification. So some of the ones that aren't represented on this page are Audubon Conservation Grazing approved. Our farm, or really our ranch that's in Arizona, is Audubon Conservation approved. That relates to grasslands. That means it's good for grassland birds. We also have people who just certified this year for regenerative organic certification, and that was one of the newer certifications that Patagonia and the Rodale Institute and Dr. Bronner's soaps all collaborated on to create a new standard, which again builds on organic. So even to be certified regenerative organic, you have to be organic certified first. And they are the first in our portfolio to do that. And they'll be having a product come out direct to consumer that will be ROC certified this fall. So we'll be excited to share more about that. But this is just kind of in the scheme of how our farmers market themselves, how they capture their value. Organic is the threshold, and we're happy to support people going above and beyond and defining what that means for them. We can move on to the next one. Back to Donna then.
Yes, I think we're at our offering. One other, not really a certification, but one that I want to mention, you maybe saw at the bottom of the page there, was the IA 50. That is a nonprofit called Impact Assets that looks at numerous companies throughout the world and selects the 50 most impactful. Iroquois has been on that list since at least 2015. And now we're an emeritus member. I'm not quite sure what that gives us, but it certainly is something that we're happy to support and proud that we have earned. And getting back to our offerings here, as you can see, we have an equity offering, which offers both potential for growth and income in the form of a dividend. It gives the shareholder a portfolio of diversified organic farms. It tends to be a pretty stable investment over the long term, although it can be very volatile from year to year. We really tell our investors that they should expect about a mid-single-digit return, combining both the share price increase and the dividend. The USDA has tracked the values of farmland for the past 100 years or so, so a pretty long track record, and it has averaged about 5% annualized. I mentioned the minimum investment is just over $10,000 or 15 shares, and there is a 5-year lockup so that we can ensure that we have the capital to support our farmers. I also mentioned shares are available to both accredited and non-accredited investors, with some exceptions. The SEC limits non-accredited investments up to 10% of an individual's annual income or net worth. We also offer loans, and that is used primarily by investors who maybe are not quite comfortable buying equity. They prefer to make sure that they're going to get the principal back. Although these loans are not secure, or the notes are not secured, it's just the putting trust in our company that we'll be around and able to make loan payments when they become due. To date, we've had no issues. We've been able to pay any loans that have matured. So the proceeds are commingled with the equity proceeds. They're used to purchase farmland or to hold mortgages for farmers. The 2% annual return is paid twice a year in January and July, 1% each time period. There's a 5-year term, and these are only available to accredited investors, and the minimum investment is $50,000. And I think that is all I have.
Terrific. Donna, Clara, thank you very much. I'm going to open it up for questions and see if we have any coming through here. Well, I had one question. I think Claire touched on this a little bit about the impact that Iroquois and the farmers are trying to make on soil health. But Claire, could you maybe talk about the importance of soil health? If I heard from another agricultural expert on the subject that soil health has really deteriorated throughout the world due to modern agricultural practices. And he gave an example that an orange grown in the United States back in 1920, it would take 8 oranges today to equal the amount of nutrients in the orange back in 1920. Would you have any commentary on that?
Yeah, there is a really excellent article from a few years ago, I think in the Science journal, that talks a lot about nutrient density collapse. And so basically, um, food is really only as nutritious as the soil it's grown in. And so soil should have minerals, it should have a lot of organic matter, it should have a lot of life in it through invertebrates. Um, we have definitely done a number on our soils in this country and globally through monocropping, decades and decades of monocropping. Um, that's really part of the issue with pesticides, is that it is not just killing weeds, it's killing all of that life in the soil. And that's why fertilizer is needed, is because we're adding fertility to something that should be naturally fertile, but we've decimated it. And so the plants and the crops really rely on external fertilizers in order to germinate, let alone exist and offer some nutrition. It's a pretty sorry state, and there's a lot of worrying articles out there and worrying studies. The idea that we're trying to support is, I think that's why pesticides are such a bright point in the organic certification. It's just a non-negotiable item. It's about creating the conditions to grow healthy food, and that absolutely starts with healthy soil. There are many practices that farmers can do that will increase their soil fertility and really support more organic matter growth. A lot of those involve integrating livestock, because manure is a great source. There's also crop rotation, so basically not planting the same thing year after year after year in the same place, allowing for some diversity in the soil life. That's kind of the basic method of why beans are great to plant before grains. So beans are nitrogen fixers. Generally, beans and legumes are. And corn is something that requires a lot of nitrogen. So if you plant it the year before, there's nitrogen available in the soil to take it up. And so this is something that many people have known for a very long time. I mean, soil health is not new. I think something that people mention a lot, and that I've just mentioned with, the corn and beans, that follows an indigenous practice of interplanting. A practice known as the Three Sisters, where beans, corn, and squash are grown together, because they all offer different things to each other in the form of nutrients and also protection. Ecosystems are also huge carbon sinks and areas of soil health. I was watching a special recently that was, wetlands as just a carbon sink that needs more celebration. And these are all really important. And so when we talk about our portfolio and the various things people are doing, whether it's specific practices like intercropping or just rotating crops, or and I'm saying or, but I'm often meaning and, it's intercropping and crop rotations and having livestock integrated and having habitat. that's a native habitat, and potentially if they have wetlands or, a river or a stream running through the property, it's doing something with that so that it's getting some restoration. All of that really matters and is desperately needed here. I think a lot of what we can point to relates to the Dust Bowl, and that's something that is not really a relic of the past. That's certainly possible again, and is happening again. There's videos out in the Central Valley of California of just dust blowing all the time because there's land, there's bare land, there's not cover crops on it. Um, you know, a lot of that emerged from plowing up the prairie, which was, a rich ecosystem, and that covered so much of the Midwest and plains. And so, I don't know that we can get to a point where all the farmland that's now representing, what used to be prairie, but that was basically, we had depleted the prairie fertility, and now we need to work to get it back. And that's through a lot more climate sensitive agriculture, and that's a lot through bringing nature back into agriculture and really integrating it. So it's a long answer, but there's so many directions, and soil health is just really the tip of it.
Well,
Yeah.
the good news, I've heard from several farmers that are becoming aware of it, or
Yeah.
they've started making the transition over, even large farms. And there was one downstate Illinois, and it's over 12,000 acres. I heard his sons came in and said, we got to do something different. So it's a very scientific approach here, taking bioscience and utilizing organic practices, as well as really figuring out what they could use instead of traditional fertilizers, and
Hmm.
they've seen results. It's
Yeah.
there is some good news on the front.
Yeah, the good news is it works. The bad news is it takes time. And so,
Yeah.
especially when you're on a fertilizer cycle, it's hard to disrupt that and
Yeah,
then not really have a good crop that first year. But
yeah.
I think it's definitely worth doing.
Well, thank you. That's terrific. On that note, I had a question from a client that was asking, certified organic. The FDA is pretty strict about the farms being certified, but they were a little skeptical, saying they've heard that some of the food has gone through and it has been certified organic. How does the FDA, that actually wasn't certified organic, how does the FDA really ensure in the United States that the food we find on our grocery shelves is truly certified organic?
Yeah, that's a great question, and kind of a blotch. And on USDA, actually. So USDA is the certifying agency, or this, governing body that goes
Oh,
over the
US.
organic program. There's also the National Organic Program. There have been loopholes, and there are a few loopholes still hanging out there. And there are certainly examples of that being taken advantage of. The Washington Post a few years ago did a massive expose about grain fraud, organic grain fraud, and that was kind of a more international situation. But that's also been exploited domestically through organic dairies, which had become, they were very large dairies, and they were not adequately following the pasture rule, which in organic certification, it's required that cows are outside for over half of the year. And so basically these have been flouting that standard. Um, it's a large it's a really big issue, organic integrity, and that is certainly something that we are aware of, and that we frankly would really like to see addressed better. I will say, after the grain fraud issue, the National Organic Program did take action, and they prosecuted some of the bad players in that. When it comes to the dairy, there's also further action, but there are still some loopholes. Some of the organizations that come to mind that are doing really good work on this are the Real Organic Project. They're based in the Northeast, and they are basically an advocacy agency and a storytelling. They tell a ton of farmer stories around organic integrity. So when it comes to following organic in spirit as well as the standard, they are very much pushing the envelope and trying to hold USDA to a higher standard. We do actually have a few farms that have gotten certified, Real Organic Project certified. And that's actually one of the only certifications that's free to farmers. But it's something, that's a big issue, and it's something that certainly is bad for the organic movement. We need to have integrity, and for consumer trust, as well as the whole thing kind of collapses without integrity. And so this is a big issue that a lot of people, certainly farmers, are paying attention to. We have a lot of farmers who are very active in whether it's the Farm Bureau, Farmers Union, their state farmers union, or even just in policy. We have people who are very involved and are on the board of the Organic Trade Organization or Association. Sorry, we certainly do our own due diligence to make sure that the farmers we are working with are truly organic. And we have a role to play, and all of our farmers are pretty aware of the role that they have to play when it comes to holding that standard high and making sure that they're the voices of it, and not, kind of these folks exploiting the loopholes for the price premium, really is what it comes down to. And so it's an ongoing issue. There has been some positive movement in the right direction in terms of accountability. I would encourage people to read about the grain fraud issue for sure, and to see how the National Organic Program has followed up on it. It's not perfect, but it's action, and that certainly counts. But it's something we're all paying attention to, and at least with our specific portfolio, we've done a lot of work to make sure we're investing in real organic.
Absolutely. And I think you have a number of farms that are on your website. Consumers can go and look at at the actual farms, where, and a number of them I've noticed, you can actually order some of their product online.
Yes, if there's any silver lining to COVID, it was a lot of our farmers either converted from B2B to business to consumer, or added a retail platform. And a lot of it, as you mentioned, John, is done online, which has been great for both the farmer and the public.
Absolutely. Terrific. Well, that is all I had on the question front. I really appreciate both of you presenting today. It was terrific information. Is there anything you'd like to close with, either Donna or Claire?
I'd just like to thank you for inviting us, John. It was really fun. If anybody has any questions, if they want to reach out to you, and feel free to direct emails to either Claire or I. We're happy to answer further questions, or talk to anybody who's interested. Claire, do you?
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Anything you wanted to end with, Claire?
No, I would just say this has been a great time. I'm very happy to answer more questions. If there's any specific questions about farmers in the Chicago area who might have products available, or who you might be able to find in the farmers markets, we're happy to put that together for folks. We have a map on our website. You can see kind of where the portfolio is and find what's local to you. And yeah, always happy to keep the conversation going, and hope to be in touch with people soon. Thank you.
Thank you,
Excellent.
John.
Thank you very much, both of you. For any additional information, you can reach out to our office. We're available during regular business hours as well as on Saturday mornings. Our office number is 630-445-2380. You can also go to our website and follow us on our blog at www.stantongwp.com. And finally, our disclosure website is right here. So thank you all for attending, and we hope to do another one of these again soon.